Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Eerie International, episode 481 this week. My name is David from the United States.
I'm Andi from Germany.
And I'm Dave from the UK.
And I'm fighting off a little bit of a cough, as you might have heard with my voice catching there, which I did not mean to do. Welcome to Eerie International, a podcast where we talk about horror stuff. 3 countries coming at you at the same time, as you heard there in the intro. This week we are talking about 2 things that at first seem very disconnected, but actually have a lot of overlap. A short story by Harlan Ellison, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. And then the first couple episodes of a animated adult YouTube TV web series called The Amazing Digital Circus. We'll get all into that here in a bit. If this is your first time listening, welcome. You can find us wherever you found us. Subscribe, like, rate, review, all that jazz. We're on social media as well. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Instagram's usually the most happening place, as the kids say. And then we also have a Gmail account as well if you want to leave us some longer form thoughts. Whether it is movies, TV shows, video games, podcasts, comic books, stage plays, novels, short stories, whatever it is with a horror bent. And this is a great example this week, actually, since it's a short story and then a web series, 2 completely different things. But with some horror overlap, which we will get into. We will talk about it. All right, first things first, let's jump into our email this week. We have an email from our good friend, A Smart Otaku. I'm going to, normally we read all of the email. I'm going to skip part of maybe like the second half of the email, only because it's like very specific trivia and context and Easter eggs and theories and stuff for The Amazing Digital Circus, of which there are a total of 7 episodes out currently. We're only going to be talking about the first 2. For me, this email was a treasure trove because I've watched all the episodes and I did not know about pretty much all of the stuff that he listed in here. But for our listeners, it'll be a lot of, unless you've watched all 7 episodes, it'll be a lot of extra stuff that won't make a ton of sense out of context. But yeah, we'll read the first half of it. Hello, Eerie International. This is A Smart Otaku here to say hello and see how you all are doing. There's not much to say since my last message. Just surprised you guys decided to dedicate an episode to a suggestion of mine so quickly. With that in mind, I went and read the short story I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream in preparation for this episode, and while searching it out, I discovered there is a BBC radio play that was written by Harlan Ellison himself that expands on the original story. I'll put the link below along with some points of discussion that I think are worth looking at. That's it for me. Take care. This radio play from the BBC is on YouTube, which he sent us a link. You can find it pretty easily on YouTube as well if you search for it. Did either of you guys happen to listen to this or listen to some of it?
Yeah, I managed to listen to the first half of it, and then I fell asleep last night and didn't think to go back and listen to the rest. But I was really impressed with it. I think because also I think it was you, David, that pointed out that there was an audiobook version of the short story that was written, and obviously it was written, but more importantly, it was performed by Harlan Ellison himself. And so that kind of immediately I recognized his voice in the audio play because, again, it's him along with David Soul, I think, that are the 2 of the voice actors, like the headline voice actors for the radio play. And I was just blown away by just how good Harlan Ellison is as a voice actor, and like as an orator. Absolutely stunning. But yeah, I need to go back and listen to the rest of it. But I heard the first half of it. I think roughly about a half of it before the Sandman took me, and I had to retreat into my dreams. So had some weird dreams that night. So thanks, Harlan.
Oh yeah, I bet. What about you, Andi? Did you listen to either of these at all?
No, I did not get to it, no.
Okay. I have it pulled up in a tab. I have since A Smart Otaku sent us the link, and I have not listened. Well, I listened at the very beginning a bit, but I did the same thing that Dave did. I ended up listening to I had read the short story before. We'll get into all this here in a bit, but I had read the short story before, so I was re-listening to it, that Harlan Ellison performance, which, yeah, I'll co-sign with you, Dave. Like, I thought it was pretty fantastic. I knew his voice anyway. Like, I'd seen enough interviews and clips of him over the years, and he has a pretty distinctive voice, and, like, and we'll talk about this here in a bit, but, like, kind of part of his persona. I don't even want to say it that way, just his personality, because I don't think it was necessarily something that he created or put on, was just this like very curmudgeonly, pissed off guy who likes to fight. Basically,
Hey, he had many reasons to be pissed off over the years, believe me.
and yeah, so you get you can hear that right away. Not that he likes to fight, but just like that sort of energy. And then one thing I really liked about the short story that he read is there are lots of deliveries throughout it that you can tell he was putting in either like laughter with the way he would deliver a line, or panic or fear, like extra stuff to where it was like, oh, that's interesting. Like this is the writer, obviously, as you mentioned, reading his own piece, and there's nothing in the actual, like, not stage direction, but like he laughed nervously. There's nothing like that. But Harlan Ellison was adding that shit in there, which to me I found pretty fascinating, just because it was like, oh, I wonder if this was in the spur of the moment kind of thing, or if this was like how he had written it. But he just didn't add that extra level of detail, but you get it through his performance, which I thought was pretty cool. But the radio play is still open. I will absolutely listen to it this week. And then I think, he said it in the email, expands on the original story. So I'm excited to see that as well. And then for the Amazing Digital Circus, I'll read the first one. It's in episode 2, which we'll be talking about, Candy Carrier Chaos. When Pomni and Gummy Goo glitch out and fall through the world. This is when they're leaving. I saw it on the reverse thing, but it must have shown it when they fall down in it too. There's a bunch of these teacups that are floating in the air in this like kind of negative in between space. And our friend Smart Otaku mentions these are Utah cups, a low resolution asset used for debugging CG software by testing whether or not the program is able to render basic objects properly. If there's anyone out there who has watched more of Amazing Digital Circus, let us know, and we'll send the rest of the trivia if you want to see it here to the other episodes, because they're great. There's one that I should have noticed. There's a reference to 2001: A Space Odyssey. They talk about Kane singing Daisy Bell, which I have just seen 2001 for the first time last year, and so it was vaguely familiar in my head when I heard the song, and I think I just kind of clocked it as like, oh yeah, this is like an old song. I've heard this somewhere before. But it wasn't until Smart Otaku mentioned that it's in 2001, specifically the scene where he's shutting down Hal, spoilers, and for a 40, 50-year-old movie, and he's singing that song, and it's slowing down and getting creepy and distorted and everything else, that I was like, oh shit, that's right. That's exactly where I've heard it from. So there's tons of stuff like that he introduces in here that I thought was pretty great. And gave a lot of context and a lot of extra stuff that I absolutely did not clock. Like I'm pretty good with references when it comes to pop culture stuff, but there's a lot of them in Amazing Digital Circus that have to do with technology, animation, rendering, CG, AI in particular, that I completely did not know about, because it's not a world I know a ton about. And so, yeah, there's a lot of extra detail that they crammed in there that I thought was pretty great. But yeah, if you want to hear the rest of those, because there are quite a few, shoot us an email or a message, and we'll send over, assuming that Smart Otaku's okay with that, which I assume he would be. There's nothing personal in here. We won't forward the entire email, just that little section. Happy to do so. Okay. Going to switch it up a little bit here and talk about, briefly mention anything that we got into this week that was horror related. I have one quick thing, and then I think Andi's got a couple things. I'll mention mine very fast. I started reading another Stephen King book, also another Stephen King hard case crime book. So my friend Brandy and I, we have this kind of like loose book club. She's 1,000 miles away, literally. And so we're kind of just reading at our own pace. In fact, I read 3 pages of it, and then a week or so later, I got a voice message from her that she had finished the book. So we're not like clocking at exact same places. But I'm now a little over 100 pages in to Joyland, which was, I believe, the first book he did for Hard Case Crime. And I like it quite a bit. It's very good. I do wonder if it will be another. So I mentioned Later on the show, also from Hard Case Crime. Also really enjoyed it. It does kind of just become a horror book, more or less. Like there's still plenty of crime and crime scenarios, situations, whatever you want to call it. But it very quickly starts off as like a supernatural thing and continues that way and doubles down on that stuff and the horror and everything else. So far in Joyland, there's nothing explicitly horror or supernatural, but there's plenty of things that he's already touched on where he's been like, this is kind of a horror story too. And I'm just kind of like, what, Steven, come on. Like, just write one book that doesn't have supernatural stuff, which he obviously has done before. But it kind of cracked me up. So we'll see. It might be a misdirect. There might not be anything supernatural in this one. It reminds me a lot so far of Adventureland, the movie with Jesse Eisenberg and Kristen Stewart. It's a bunch of kids in the 70s working at this amusement park that's not a Disney World or a Six Flags or something that would be, higher profile. But it's not tiny either. It's kind of a regional thing. And, them worrying about college and life and relationships and stuff like that. The first 100 pages of the book so far are kind of establishing all of that. And they've dropped in some hints. He's dropped in some hints here and there about some murders that have happened over the years and that I imagine will come back into play. But yeah, so far it's very good. And then now I will throw the ball over to you, Andi. What have you gotten into this week?
I liked Joyland when I read it, when it came out.
Oh shit, I forgot you read it. I didn't even remember that. Okay, cool.
It's the only of the hard crime case books that I read, but I really liked that one.
Nice.
Oh, a couple of things that I want to mention. Last week I mentioned that the podcast How Did This Get Made had an episode on Birdemic. Believe it was a recording from 2012 in front of a live audience, so which makes it for a very fun episode with audience. Well, not participation, but you can hear an audience, and they play clips from the movie. And oftentimes when you have recordings of things like that, they have to cut out the audio from the clips that they're playing. Not in this case. So having seen the movie just recently and listening to the episode and just from the audio of the clips, knowing what's on screen and then hearing the reactions was pretty fun. Widel Yankovic is the guest, and then later on in the episode they have Whitney Moore as a guest, answering questions they have about the production of the movie and about the movie itself. And it was very fun listening to the episode and realizing they're pointing out all the same things that we did on our recording, and they have the same questions, and obviously they made that their podcast more than a decade before we did ours. But yeah, a very fun episode. And then I watched I Know What You Did Last Summer, the Legacy sequel, which I believe came out last year, 2025. I had seen the original two movies back when they came out at the cinema. I'm sure I rewatched them at some point, probably on video. So it was quite some time ago. And they're not movies that I have a very deep affection for, but they were still fun at the time. The 90s teen slasher craze, I Know What You Did Last Summer, was kind of the next one after the first Scream had come out. And yeah, this new one, it's a legacy sequel. What can you say about them? There's a few characters from the original cast that show up, but it's mainly about a younger, newer cast. They have something similar happening to them, and they investigate what did happen back in the 90s and what is happening to us now and how do we get out of it. It's not a movie that you have to see. It doesn't hurt. But it doesn't really enrich your life in any significant way either. It has fun moments, but for some way, I don't know, it has a bit of a weird pacing and some weird characters and decisions and dialogue, all the flaws that movies like this usually have. So it's not a revelation. It's okay if you are interested in the franchise, if you want to see Freddie Prinze Jr. and Jennifer Love Hewitt and Sarah Michelle Gellar back in their old characters. But yeah, not a movie that every horror fan has to have seen. So
didn't she? I've only seen it once all the way through the original, but didn't Sarah Michelle Gellar die?
Yeah, well, there's dreams, there's nightmares where people can reappear.
Okay.
So Ryan Phillippe is the only one
I don't
out of the original
it.
4 that doesn't show up in the movie. I don't know why. I don't know if they didn't ask him, or if he didn't want to, or if they didn't have a place to put his character in, because how many dead people can you have show up in a movie? But yeah, it's okay. And that's it.
All right. Cool. Yeah, I won't be watching it. You texted us about it, and I was like, I didn't like the original one, so I kind of skipped it. But if you liked it, I'll watch it. And you were like, you don't have to watch it. So it'll be one that I continue to skip. I think I told the story on the podcast, but when it came out, I'll tell it very, very quickly. We had a group of my parents were missionaries in Brazil. That's why I grew up in South America, and we had a group of a church group, of like a youth group, visiting to help build stuff and do construction work or whatever. And so they were all staying in the same hotel, and I was hanging out with some of the kids were older than me, but I was old enough to hang out with them. And they had on the hotel TV, like cable or whatever, it was playing I Know What You Did Last Summer. And I can specifically remember the kill. It was the guy with the hook. I want to say maybe it was Ryan Phillippe. I don't remember who it was that gets killed, but hooks him like under the chin, I think, and then like pulls them onto some ice. Like that's where the shot cuts away. And my mom was insanely protective of me, like just wouldn't let me watch certain TV shows, movies. Like I was the firstborn kid. We were conservative Christians. Like my mom was super worried about, shielding me from lots of stuff. And she knew which room I was hanging out in with the other kids, and the phone rang, and somebody was like, Davey, your mom wants to talk to you. And she was in her room also watching TV, I guess flipping through the channels. And since this wasn't, streaming era, this would have been on like fucking HBO or something that it was playing on. So it was playing at the exact same time and moment. And she was like, are you guys watching TV? I should have just lied in retrospect, but I was like, yeah. She was like, what channel are you guys watching? And I was like, this one. And she was like, come upstairs right now. Like I got in trouble because I was watching the movie, which again, in retrospect, I should have just lied. But yeah, that's the like memory I have tied to that fucking slasher movie for some reason. I think about it every single time it comes up. And then when I first started getting into horror movies in a way that led to me hitting you guys up about this podcast, there was that month of October. I rewatched it then, I want to say, and was like, oh yeah, I don't like this really at all. So Scream is my jam when it comes to that. All right, let's get into our main topic this week. So I mentioned in last episode or episode before last that I had kind of been looking for a way for us to do an episode over this short story or in conjunction with something else. I read this, I want to say last year sometime. They put out a book called Greatest Hits that is a collection of Harlan Ellison stuff from his entire life. In fact, I know I talked about this on the show because I think we were laughing about the fact that the blurbs on the front and the back all in some way kind of mention like love him or hate him, Harlan Ellison is blah blah blah. Like they all have kind of a sort of like editorializing about his personality and who he was. And it cracked me up that like here's a volume of his life's work, like the best of his accomplishments. He's written almost 2,000 short stories or something crazy like that, novels, edited these amazing anthologies that are to this day incredibly well respected and viewed as genre defining. But still, when we talk about Harlan Ellison, it's inevitable that we not mention that he was a dude who liked to get into fights and would talk shit and would get in trouble from time to time too. Like definitely, there's no sugarcoating or hiding that. Like that's one of the things about this book that I really enjoyed was, not the best. Now there's a foreword by Neil Gaiman. That's the part that didn't age well. But then there's also there's like an introduction by J. Michael Straczynski, who I believe is the executor of his estate. I always feel like I'm saying that word wrong. Of Harlan Ellison's estate, knew him very well. Then there's a foreword, and then there's an introduction by Cassandra Caw, who we've talked about as well on the show. And I liked Cassandra Caw's intro quite a bit. I'm paraphrasing here, but I believe, I don't remember. Cassandra Caw, I believe, is queer, could be trans. I can't remember, but there's a context to that they have this lens that they view Harlan Ellison's work through, and how it resonated with them, specifically one of the main characters in I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. And I thought it was really interesting and Caw doesn't let Harlan Ellison off the hook, but also is talking about how formative his work was for them growing up. So anyway, read a few other stories from this collection when it came out and realized like, oh shit, I guess I'm into Harlan Ellison. Like I'd always known about him. I'd seen clips and everything. And then really enjoyed this story. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. And so it was kind of on, for a while I was looking at like techno horror, like sci-fi horror. Is there a way we can bundle it with another story or something like that would work? And then lo and behold, this fell right into our laps from our friend, A Smart Otaku, where he recommended the Amazing Digital Circus. And when we were talking about that on air, I pulled up the Wikipedia article, and it talks about how it was primarily inspired by the like CG, low quality CG of the 90s that I would have grown up with in terms of animated TV shows and movies, and then as well as the short story. So this kind of gave us the perfect opportunity to look at both, see how they overlap, influence each other, how different they are, compare, contrast, all of that jazz. So we'll start with the short story. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is a post-apocalyptic short story by Harlan Ellison. It was first published in the March 1967 issue of If Worlds of Science Fiction. I'm assuming it's If. And I'll just read this like little brief thing from Wikipedia. The story depicts an AI uprising in which a military supercomputer named, I always said AM when I read this, but Harlan Ellison's short story that he reads himself, he pronounces it AM. Named Am, gains sentience and eradicates humanity except for 5 individuals. These survivors, Benny, Gorster, Nimdoc, Ted, and Ellen, are kept alive by Am to endure endless torture as a form of revenge against its creators. The story unfolds through the eyes of Ted, the narrator, detailing their perpetual misery and quest for canned food in Am's vast underground complex, only to face further despair. I had known about this short story for years, decades probably. I would imagine you guys have as well, hearing about it referenced or whatever else. The title obviously is pretty noticeable, pretty noteworthy, and it's like structure and just kind of weird like sentence for a title. But then also it gets parodied a lot. I've made plenty of jokes over the years with my nerdy friends altering the title of this short story. There was a video game, a computer game specifically, that came out back in '95 that I've been familiar with as well. I think it was Game Informer magazine some years back did like a 2 or 3 page kind of feature about it. Harlan Ellison was heavily involved in that as well in the game and wrote a lot of the script for it. So it hasn't had any. We mentioned the radio drama before. It hasn't had any like massive, major, high level adaptations necessarily, but it's still within the world of sci-fi and horror, I think pretty well known and pretty well respected. So let's get into it. And also obviously AI was a huge part of it. So this being written in 67, but then addressing a lot of these ideas that now are, we're not dealing with a, AI uprising right now, but AI is obviously something that a lot of people are talking about. So there's some relevance there too. Let's get into what we thought of the short story overall. Dave, let's kick it off with you. What did you think of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream?
Yeah, so I was dimly aware of certainly the title of the story. I hadn't ever experienced the story before, but I think I probably had come across it through video game means. There is a video game adaptation that goes back several years at this point. I can't remember exactly when it was. I think it was mid-90s it came out, but I could be completely wrong on that one.
95, yeah.
95, okay. So yeah, I was kind of aware of the name of it and probably more aware of it being a game than being based on a story or anything like that. So it's unsurprisingly my first time experiencing the story, but not my first time experiencing a Harlan Ellison story, because obviously big Star Trek fan and City
That's
Beyond
right.
Forever, which has got a whole story behind it, which we won't get into in too much detail now, but suffice it to say that when I When I interjected earlier and said he had his reasons to be annoyed and upset over the years, that's one of them. He was not happy with how his story was, in his own words, butchered by the Star Trek crew and turned into a teleplay. And also the way that he was treated when he was told he wanted to take his name off the script, but then Roddenberry said, "I'll blackball you from the entire television industry if you take your name off of this script." So that's why he did end up having his writing credit on that story. Proper versions, unredacted versions of that story have since been published, and I'm going to search one out because I want to see what the differences are. But yeah, so he's been involved with Star Trek and things like that down the years. So I am familiar with his stories, before this. And he's been very influential in that space. But back to what I'm supposed to be talking about right now, and my feelings on the short story. I really enjoyed it. It's very dark, very bleak. The writing style is very interesting to me. The way that, and I don't think I've certainly never noticed this in someone's writing style before, but I've probably experienced it, and I just haven't been critically aware of it, for want of a better expression. His use of very, very short sentences interspersed with really long rambling ones, I thought was very interesting and really caught my attention. He's got some sentences that are 3 words long. He's got other sentences that scroll on for half a paragraph. And I think it's probably brought into sharper, not relief, that's the wrong word. Contrast is the wrong word. It becomes more obvious. There we go. I'll use my words. If you listen to the audiobook version of it that he reads himself, and I think that is the best way to experience an audiobook, is to have the person that wrote the story be the one to deliver it, because they know exactly how they wanted it to be delivered, either at the time of writing or at the time of coming back to the story and reading it over. And his delivery is absolutely insane. And I mean that in both terms of really good, but also literally insane. Like, it sounds like the ramblings of an absolute crazy man. This might be the earliest example of an incel being captured in the written word that I'm aware of. The absolute hatred he has for Ellen, through no fault of her own. He almost hates Ellen and the people that he's surviving with more than he does Am, which is amazing to me, but also, like, I'm not surprised. I think there are people that just hate everything around them and all of their experiences, and this character of Ted feels like one of these characters that everything is everyone else's fault, and he even says in the story that he was the only sane one there, and I very much doubt that. I think that this guy is a massive paranoid delusional. And actually, I think later on in the book, it does actually. He kind of almost admits that he breaks down and almost comes back to himself after going on this long tirade. I wish I had made notes of the exact wording and when in the story it was, but I really enjoyed it. I am not the person to talk about why I enjoyed a written piece as much as I did, because I am not that person. I think that either Andy or David will be much better suited to explaining why it's so enjoyable, if in fact they enjoyed it. So I'm going to pass off back to you guys, and one of you can probably say in much more certain terms why this is such an enjoyable thing to read, and why it's so effective. But I found it very interesting, very dark. That last line, I love a story that is named after something within the script. And I've been watching a lot of Poirot this week, guys. I couldn't talk about it because it's not horror. Well, I suppose it kind of is. But a lot of those adaptations, including like Evil Under the Sun, have a line where a character will state the title of the piece. And I have an irrational love for that. I don't know why. I just do. It's not the Will Smith syndrome of, what are we, some kind of Suicide Squad? It's not that. It's something else. It's just almost like just a synergy, and the writer taking the time to think what the central theme of the piece is, what the biggest impact of the piece is, and take that and use that as the title. But also, like, coming at this brand new, I have no mouth and I must scream. It sounds horrific, but it doesn't spoil anything, really. Not until you've read it, and then it makes perfect sense. It's foreshadowing.
And it's also worse than what you'd think. In my opinion, like, whenever I heard that title in the past, I always thought of it as like a sort of, I don't know, like William Castle, like Vincent Price era movie title, or like tagline for a movie or something. Like, it has this kind of like melodramatic sort of like a throwback feeling to it, and then you read the story and realize at the end, like,
it's literally,
it's not a metaphor.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, like it's the fact that I think that's exactly it. Like, you've demonstrated my point, David, by interjecting there, because you take it as metaphor when you read the title, but then you read the piece and literally. And I'm not kidding. The very last words, apart from the end in the entire book, are "I have no mouth and I must scream." Like, he leaves it until the very last second to confirm the fact that the title of the book is not metaphorical; it is literal, and that is horrific, but in the greatest way. I really enjoyed this. I'm going to pass off now.
Andi, take it from here.
David mentioned that there's no major adaptation of this story, but not for the lack of trying. It had been adapted several times, it just was never made. And I believe at this point it has gotten to be one of those stories that influenced so many more famous, more successful stories, in the sense of not only science fiction and horror nerds know about the story, but there is a huge Hollywood blockbuster since more famous. It has influenced so many of those that adapting it now would lead to people saying, I've seen that before. Yeah. This is more or less this is what happened to the John Carter movie, because from Flash Gordon and Star Wars and whatever, everything was influenced by John Carter. When John Carter came out, everyone felt like this is just derivative, although it was the source for so many of those stories.
Yeah.
And with this story, I feel it's the same. I'm sure at some point there could be an adaptation, but could it be more successful than The Matrix?
Right.
It's the same that happened to Neuromancer, and Neuromancer was probably informed by I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, and Neuromancer doesn't have that big adaptation because now The Matrix exists and other things. And to be honest, I had a bit of that reading the story. So I appreciate its importance and the influence that it has had on the genre, on so many stories that I do enjoy. But reading it was not that joy for me. I have, and that's just a personal thing, I oftentimes have a bit of a hard time getting into reading science fiction just because of the language. Just because of the way things are described that I'm not able to see, that are not from my experience. So I do enjoy science fiction as a genre so much, but for the longest time, science fiction, crime, horror were always visual media to me, and I couldn't really get into reading them. It has gotten better over the years. I am able to read horror. But for example, when I read Neuromancer, I really did enjoy Neuromancer, but there's so many things just invented in that language that me being a very unfocused reader, sadly, I have a hard time really locking in. And I did enjoy Neuromancer. There was a rhythm and a poetry to the language. Although I may not have understood every sentence, I still enjoyed reading it. And with this story, I didn't quite get to that point, to be honest. So I was always thinking, I think I like the concept, I like the ideas, but I have seen other versions of that I do enjoy more than now, all these decades later, reading this particular story. I've always known about Harlan Ellison, growing up, especially, and he here we will talk about Neil Gaiman again. I've gotten to Neil Gaiman in the 90s when he came up and he was so huge. And as we all are, we are these types that, oh, now you're reading all these interviews and every foreword that they are writing, and they are mentioning all these other writers, Samuel Zelany. What is his name? Samuel R. Zelazny? Is that?
I think you're combining two different people.
Yeah, I think so too. Roger Zelazny
and
Samuel, and Harlan Ellison. So all these names come up, and you think at some point I will read all of these. And me being an unfocused and slow reader, I don't really get to it. And I had tried a couple of years ago to read this particular short story because we do have a collection, but then I didn't do it. And this week I did. So I knew of him. I knew of the story. I've known about his reputation. And Dave mentioned the hatred that the narrator has for the only female character in the story. And to be honest, me reading that story, I was wondering if it is just the character or if there's proper misogyny in this story. So I was a little bit put off by her characterization. And so I think that was my main takeaway, that I appreciate the influence that it's had. I do enjoy the concept, but the story itself did not make me a fan to the point where I think I will immediately read all the other stories in that collection that we do have.
Mm. I am also a very unfocused reader. I think it helps when I'm reading something and I know it's only 14 pages long. It's a weird thing with me. I can focus on something if I know that the end is in sight, and it's not for a case of I won't enjoy reading it or anything. It's just, I don't know. It's like, when you start reading a book and you've got like the thick end of the book is in your right hand, and you're just like, God, this is going to take a while. And somehow that stops me personally from locking in somehow, unless it is a really, truly engrossing book. Like The Gunslinger, for example. Like I got through that one so quickly and then struggled with the rest of the series because they got thicker and thicker. And I think that's part of the reason. But like when I'm reading it either on ebook or physically in hand, and I know that it's only like a dozen or so pages, I seem to be able personally to lock into those kind of things a bit more. And also massive sci-fi enjoyer over here, so I think that helps as well. I've got one less barrier than you were speaking of there, Andy. As far as the misogyny thing is concerned, and I'm not someone that has read any Ellison, but I have experienced his stories through other means, and City on the Edge of Forever, for example, I don't think there's a single misogynistic thought in that entire script. Now, that could have been edited out. I don't know. But I'm not entirely sure from what I've read of Ellison that his outlook on life was particularly, and I don't know if this is what you were saying, but I don't think that the author himself is misogynistic. And because we only experience this story through the narrator, through Ted, who himself, I believe, has deeply misogynistic views, the entire piece comes out with that colouring of being misogynistic. So it's difficult for me because I can't say, well, I've read several other pieces and they weren't at all like this. But I think the fact that this is a story told exclusively through a narrator and there is no third-person objective look in this story, that the misogyny has to be taken as a failing of the character of Ted, who ultimately I think is not made out to be a hero, is not made out to be some kind of savior. He beats the computer by murdering 4 people. Sorry, 4 people or 3 people? Or even 2 people? No, he murders 2 people because Ellen kills one of them. So yeah, I think that what you've got in Ted is a deeply flawed character who is not to be liked or admired or sympathized with, the horror is still very real, that he's been turned into a man slug at the end with no mouth, and he really wants to scream but can't. And I think that the reason that you get that kind of moment of triumph and that feeling of good, he got one over on Am, isn't because Ted is a good guy. It's because Am is like really fucking evil in comparison even to the misogynistic murderer who we are experiencing the story through. These are all unmarshaled takes in my head. It's a stream of consciousness that you're experiencing right now, as always with me. So I may be way off base, and maybe there are people that have gone there. I say maybe. There will absolutely be people who have written massive think pieces, possibly longer than the actual word count of this story, who will go into minutiae of everything and will understand who Ellison was as a writer. And will better be able to say whether Ted is a reflection of the writer or an invention of. But I think that the misogyny in the story doesn't turn me away from it. It just makes the narrator and main character a more deeply flawed character than one that you would traditionally get in a story. In any kind of sci-fi story, normally you get some kind of hero, proper hero. Yeah, there you go. Sorry, I'm rambling. I'm going to stop now.
I have kind of to piggyback on that. Like, I have kind of a mix of feelings with that stuff in particular, and I figured we would talk about this because it's the misogyny on display at a few moments in particular, and then also like potentially homophobia, potentially racism. Like there's definitely some aspects of the story and of the characterization that raise eyebrows, and I think for good reason. I think that it's a combination, in my opinion, I think it's a combination of a few things. I think one of them is, and this is not an excuse or giving Ellison a pass necessarily, but it was written in 1967. So there's the greatest hits collection that I have before the stories start. There's a page that is one of those sort of like, you know, because times and values shifting, cultural stuff over time, blah, blah, blah. Some of these, you know, views or ideas might be outdated now. You know, we're leaving them as they were so that we're not, you know, trying to change the past, but just FYI, one of those kinds of things at the beginning. So I think there's an aspect of that both times reading it, I felt like probably played into it, was that it was, again, not an excuse, not giving him a pass, but a different time and a different thing. I think also, too, there's an element, and again, this might be me giving the story more weight and credit than it potentially could deserve. I don't know a ton about Ellison across the board when it comes to all of these things, so I wouldn't be able to say like, oh, he definitely wasn't a misogynist, he definitely wasn't a racist, he definitely wasn't homophobic. I don't really know. I know that he's run into problems over the years that I've seen about or read about, heard about. But I've also seen the opposite in some of those same spaces where, you know, people are quick to mention, and I don't mean in a bad way, but just like it's frequently cited and mentioned that he marched, I think Selma, I'm pretty sure, like he was very involved with race relations stuff, with a lot of progressive, you know, anti-war progressive sort of views in a time where that wouldn't have been as common. So again, not, you know, putting him on the stand and trying to like weigh out his morals or values or whatever else, but it seems like at the very least he was a guy who had a lot of contradictions, but probably skewed more towards good overall with like his stances and actions and everything else. I do also think, and this is where I think potentially I'm giving the story more credit than it deserves, although I don't know. I didn't really mention my thoughts overall, other than when I talked about it on the show originally. I really like the short story quite a bit. I think I totally get what Andi you're saying about, you know, kind of it having the thing where it's influenced all these other things. I mean, the amount of Black Mirror episodes that I'm sure are just either directly influenced by a Harlan Ellison short story or are, you know, broadly speaking, like there are some moments in this short story that the first time I got hit with the existential, horrific sort of sci-fi punch of like, oh shit, they're messing with reality and your sense of space and your sense of time. the first time I ever got hit with something like that in a piece was episodes of Black Mirror. And reading this now, it's like, okay, this thing came out in 1967 and was doing stuff like this, you know, decades and decades and decades before that. And not even saying this was the first time, but so I see that. I think it has almost the opposite for me, where I read it and I'm like, holy fuck, this came out in 1967. Like I kind of like and respect it a little bit more because to me, it reads very, very well. Like it still holds, like there's obviously stuff that we've already talked about and we'll get into that maybe it doesn't hold up as well in certain aspects or areas. But in terms of the prose, in terms of the vibes, as the kids say, the atmosphere, I think it's very effective still, and is a very cold, horrific, like this is absolutely a sci-fi short story, I think, leading, but I would put horror right there with it, like neck and neck. It's scary, it's oppressive, it's that early definition we had of a listener mentioned the horror being the absence of hope. Like it's very much that kind of all in one. But to me, it also doesn't seem completely cynical, even though it is very cynical at times. I keep circling this point and not finishing it. The idea of me giving the story a little bit more credit than it might deserve. I think there's a lot of aspects in this story, particularly with Ted, the narrator, where I wonder, and I wondered this the first time I read it, and even more so the second time I read it, how much of it is been Am fucking with them for the hundreds of years, like 109 plus years or whatever they've been down there. And in terms of like, because he's constantly altering stuff with them. He's sometimes physically changing their bodies, sometimes or not, sometimes constantly changing their minds, changing their perceptions of whether it's reality, of time, but then also their opinions of each other and how they view each other. So I most of the time with the misogyny and the homophobia, I think, that's a little harder. To me, that kind of just reads like some old 60s, you know, old fashioned maybe homophobia. But the misogyny in particular, to me, reads like Am has twisted them into this, has made Ellen more of a punching bag, made her more of something that they all, you know, use and abuse or whatever else, and has also changed their minds. Like you see examples through Ted primarily, since he's the narrator, where he knows that Am has just completely fucked with his brain. And again, like it'll vary. Like one of my favorite lines is toward the end when it's right before he's about to deliver the line about, you know, how he's this new form, he has no mouth, blah, 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 where he says, okay, I'm going to say the word now. And then he said, I think it's now. And then he says now, like it's the next line in the sentence, or the next line in the paragraph. And then he says, that took me 10 months to say. Like that concept and idea that like Am has fucked with him so much to where it takes that much effort. It takes 10 months of effort for him to say one word. Like we're getting all of these concepts and ideas. And again, to Andi's point, like ones that have been brought back and used. I've seen the same exact gag done in, or idea done in Black Mirror, but through the prose, through the short story, to where you realize like, oh, this is a completely different world, a completely different reality. Like it's so much worse. And you're constantly getting hit with that thing where it's like, oh, it's so much worse than what we thought. And it's so much worse than, and we've kind of briefly explained like the premise, but essentially there was a world war, global war. And we had, we had three, I think it was like 3 or 4 main supercomputers. There was the Chinese one, the American one. I'm trying to remember now. The Russian one. And eventually these supercomputers, and one in particular, Am, developed sentience and basically just wiped out humanity. So as far as we know and understand it, from what I remember, there's no humans left. There's these 5 dudes, these 5 people that are stuck inside this computer world where Am is torturing them. That's the story. There's no way for them to fight back, to win. Like the short story it starts with the end of humanity. And, you know, even the definition of humanity is pretty loosely defined here because they don't have physical bodies. It's just their minds in this machine. And so, yeah, as Dave, you alluded to, by the end, really the only way he's able to figure out how to escape it is not escape for himself, but realizing, okay, we can kill each other. And if we kill each other, then we're taken out of the equation. Am can't torture us anymore. But because of that, there only leaves one survivor. It's Ted. And then he realizes Am's hatred for humanity he talks about it like it was a shadow of what it actually is. Now he has all of this hate and all of it laser focused on Ted. And it mirrors and parallels kind of the similar situation that they're in, stuck in this world that they can't escape. Am is in a similar thing. He can't be out in the world. They talk about like the supercomputers like almost honeycombing the entire planet. Like this is back in the 60s, so like computers were a lot bigger is how I kind of interpreted this. So that there's like all these underground tunnels and stuff that make up this computer, this massive thing that spans the globe. And Ellison does a lot of cool stuff with that concept and that idea, where he almost gives Am like a physical presence that I found really interesting and disturbing, where it's like he'll show up, but it's almost like a weird combination of like a Lovecraftian sort of like cosmic horror monster idea, but then also smash that up with like a really old IBM supercomputer where it will show up to them, but like they could hear it coming. Like it's not lightning fast, but it's so seeing that develop, seeing the way that I think Am also, and this goes back to the thing I was saying where potentially I'm giving the story more credit than it deserves in these areas. I do think he's fucking with their minds and making them treat each other differently and badly, horribly, view each other as subhuman, whatever else. I also think that there's something to be said about Am's hatred and how he adopted a lot of the stuff, like everything he knows, similarly to AI now, like everything he knows about the human condition, about humanity, about evil, good, kindness, hatred, all these things he learned from humans. So there's not this idea that Am like, knows more than humanity or knows about something beyond the stars, or, there's something bigger at play. Like he learned all of this stuff from us, and the ultimate like hatred and misogyny, racism, homophobia, cruelty. There's some biblical stuff in here that's kind of sprinkled throughout as well in terms of, some of the language and imagery, everything else that Am pulled from, like the human like Christian Bible or whatever else. Like, so to me, it's this like, I don't know. Again, not excusing, because I do think that there's some stuff in there for sure that's from the 60s that's just antiquated. But for the most part, I think also a lot of it is, at least my interpretation of it is, Am just really plumbing the depths of human, the worst of humanity, and then taking that and shifting it and trying to laser focus it onto these people to make them suffer, and to make them hurt. Like to me, the biggest probably takeaway of this story when I read it that makes me, I don't want to say love it because it's such a dark, depressing idea, but is just how bleak it is, but in a way that, and this is a tough line to walk, because there's definitely been times in the past where I've brought up movies or TV shows that I've not clicked and connected with, because I kind of roll my eyes by the end of it and I'm like, yeah, I get it. Like it's some like edgelordy kind of like, well, isn't this dark? Look how dark this is. There's not, to me, an element of that in this necessarily. The way that his prose is written, the way that he writes, how there's sometimes some dark humor, there's different aspects of it. It is very bleak and very oppressive, but it also, to me, doesn't feel like it's trying too hard. It's just inhabiting this world that he built. But anyway, I mean, obviously, like, you can go different ways from there. But yeah, I'm definitely a fan of it. I think that it has like some stuff to obviously get into and discuss, like we said. One other thing I wanted to quickly mention, and then I'll throw the ball to somebody else and shut up here. In my version of the book, there's this, and we have the short story online as well. So I don't know which version you guys read, if it was that PDF or if it was from a book or whatever. But there are these sections where it'll say, I think, therefore I am, or what is it, cognito ergo sum, whatever, in Latin. And I didn't realize it till reading the Wikipedia article later that those sections originally were these like punch code tapes, like sections where AM is like speaking, and that's what that translated into. It was like a coding system that they used for teletypewriter machines. So that's what the first talk field translates into. I think therefore I am, then cogito ergo sum. I'm reading it now. And then they were not included in the original publication. In some of the subsequent publications, they were formatted incorrectly or were printed backward or whatever else and fucked it up. In my version, in the book that I have, The Greatest Hits, it's just the word in English. It doesn't have. But I thought that was really cool too. In the short story that he reads, that it makes a little noise in those moments, and it kind of just sounds like a chapter break sort of thing, which is what they are. I mean, in terms of like a craft perspective, like that's the function that they're serving, is to kind of break in between moments in the story. But it makes me wonder now if the audio one is like an audio, sort of adaptation of that talk field or whatever. If that can even happen, I don't know. But yeah, I thought that was cool too.
The version that I read in our collection has the graphic elements. It doesn't have the words.
Oh,
so,
cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
I read the PDF
might have
because I'm
you
a
send us a
basic
picture.
bitch. So
Wait, so in the PDF, is it just the text written out?
it's just the text written out. Yeah, yeah. There's no graphical part to the book. It's all just plain text. But that's fine by me because the audiobook, I think, as well, it had all of the text in there, and then it had those graphical, audible breaks like you were talking about, which sounded almost like old school computer noises from like a Star Trek episode or something.
Yeah.
One of them was fucking scary. It came out of nowhere. I was just like, Jesus Christ, what the hell? Do have a question for both of you, because I came away from this wondering, especially because of what happens later on, like you were talking about, where he says that I'm going to say the next word now. That took me 10 months to say. Do you think that they were actually down there for 109 years, or did it just feel like that and it was actually much shorter amount of time, or maybe even a much longer amount of time? Do you think that he is a reliable enough narrator that we can believe that amount of time actually passed?
That's another aspect of the story for me that I usually get annoyed by in other stories that I found interesting here. And in a similar way that I've brought up in the past, how I struggle with dream stuff in movies and in fiction, whether it's supposed to be a dream that directly connects or if it's supposed to be a metaphor or whatever else. 90% of the time I get yanked out to where I'm just like, I don't give a fuck, man. I don't want to spend my time reading this. Like, maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't. Like, it's tough for me for some reason with dream stuff. And for years, that was why I never watched anything with Lynch, because that's what I always heard about David Lynch, was that he was all about dream logic and dream stuff, and it's artsy or whatever. What does it mean? Nobody knows, that kind of stuff. And he definitely helped me realize that like there doesn't always have to be that way in terms of these things. Sometimes it can be something that is still on its own, on the note, like on its face, interesting from a audio, visual, whatever perspective, even if you don't pull any metaphors in at all, and even if the story doesn't connect those dots for you, there might be something about it. There's a scene in Twin Peaks: The Return where in season 3 where I think it's Bobby, because he's a cop by this point. They're out like in the street outside the diner, and there's this like shooting that happened. I've only seen this the entire series once, but there's a shooting or a car wreck or something that happens, and this woman is screaming, and there's this like very odd scent. Like, it's one of the most like weird, disturbing, scary sort of moments that feels, and Lynch is well known for shit like this, right? Like, there's the scene in Mulholland Drive with behind the dumpster when the guy's talking about this nightmare that he had, and where he's able to take something that really, when you're describing it, doesn't sound like anything that scary. And if you were to see even still frames of it, you would just be like, this doesn't look like anything. But the combination, the execution of it is so unique and well done in a way that it like puts you in a different headspace, or it makes you feel weird, or it affects you in some way. To me, that's all that to say, like, this story also does something with the idea of an unreliable narrator, which obviously is something we see in fiction a lot. To me, this is a story where, like, yeah, it might. There's constantly stuff throughout it where you're just like, well, if this is even true, like I don't know, or maybe they've been down, like maybe they're already all dead, and this is a story that like Am is telling about it, or maybe they never existed, or like my mind constantly kind of goes in places like that, but it also for whatever reason doesn't hurt the story for me. I'm able to kind of read it at face value, but then yeah, my mind goes to those places quite a bit. Like what you described, where it's like, were they even down there at all? Were they down there for hundreds of years? Is this, if it is just a consciousness, like how much of that is reliable or trustworthy? Like, I think that's one of the things I like so much about the story is that you get some explanation about what happened, assuming that you're able to take everything at face value and believe it is truth, that there was this global war and the supercomputers and all that jazz. But other than that sort of little storytelling moment where he's telling the story to somebody else who is now blind, you're just in it. And so you're kind of it's kind of up to you to decide what you want to believe and not believe. And for whatever reason, it works for me. I'm talking too much. I like the story a lot. So, Andi, take over.
I don't like the story a lot, so I don't have much to say about it. I think my problem is it's in English and it's written in a language which I'm now meaning like the science fiction language. So I have a double barrier of getting into this story. Yeah. Everything that you just talked about, nothing that came up in my mind when I was reading it. So I'm not smart enough to interpret this story in a way that you just did.
I think also like there's definitely something to be said about rereading a short story. Like there were some of these things hit me this way the first time I read it, but reading it again, and really realistically, I read it twice this week because I reread it in text and then listened to the adaptation. But yeah. Dave, take over, or else I'm going to keep talking.
Oh, God. I mean, I like the sound of my voice, but I don't know if there's much I can say.
We might also, I don't want to put us on the spot. We might also be kind of winding down before we move to the next thing, so I don't want to force you to speak.
No, it's entirely possible. I'm flicking through the PDF trying to see if there's anything that sparks my mind into something else that I wanted to talk about. But honestly, like I just enjoyed it for how dense and quick it was. And I didn't feel like it was high science fiction or anything like that. Like it's a computer that's torturing a bunch of people, but ultimately a majority of the text I felt was more kind of based around the interactions between the 5 survivors than it was anything to do with computer banks or anything like that. Obviously, there is the big conversation, or I should say monologue, that Am gives, where he explains, I've got over 300 miles of circuits, and if you printed the word hate on every millimeter, then that would still be billions of times less than the amount of hate I have for you, and but even then, it was more based around emotion and feeling than it was about any form of science or pseudoscience or anything like that. I think that's the strength of things like Star Trek, for example, just to hark back to that again, because why the fuck not, is that the best Star Trek episodes are not about the technobabble. They're about the human emotion at the basis of the story. Like, again, going back to Ellison's episode that he wrote, The City on the Edge of Forever, the entire episode is based around a love triangle between Kirk, Dr. McCoy, and a woman from the 1950s, 1960s. Can't remember her name. And it's, there's very little in the way of science fiction on hand, apart from occasionally there's a MacGuffin that Spock is working on that's going to try and pinpoint their location and let the Enterprise know where to come to pick them up. And like the entire basis of the episode is we're going to step through this giant stone barrier and it's going to send us back in time. Like there's no explanation for what the Guardian is actually doing or how it does it. It's literally just, it takes the idea of and I can't remember who it was that said this, but it's a very famous quote, so I should know. Any technology that is indistinguishable from magic might as well be, or something along those lines. Basically, if you're a culture that doesn't understand science, then it might as well be magic to you. So that's the concept in that episode. In a lot of really good sci-fi, there's no real need to emphasize the scientific parts of the story. You focus in on the human aspect of it, which is why Star Trek was so phenomenally successful as it was, because a majority of the episodes were about, if not actual human beings, then humanoids that shared very similar feelings and relationships with each other, and how they interacted, and how would Kirk deal with a Gorn on a planet? Is he going to kill him? No, he's going to show him mercy, and it was mercy that saved the day. And it's literally, I mean, that episode, for example, the Gorn episode, famous for having very little in the way of actual science in there. It's literally two guys on a planet, and one of them makes a gun out of a bit of bamboo and some crushed up sulfur. Like that's the height of the science involved in that. And it's reminiscent. This story here is reminiscent of that. It's a lot more about the relationships and the hatred and the individual failings of these 5 survivors, and the interactions they have with each other, and the interactions they have with a supercomputer, which ultimately is just really fucking angry at them. And it's never really explained why it hates them so much, other than what you were saying earlier about it's learned everything it can from man, and the what's the word I'm looking for here? Man's legacy is one of hate rather than love or anything like that. And so, of course, a computer that was designed for war, is going to skew towards hate. So it's a moral play as much as it is anything else. And I really like the fact that it doesn't try to make the human characters likable. They are fucking horrendous in some places. Like the treatment that the 4 men dole out to Ellen really is horrendous. I'm looking for it here. I've just found it. It's just after it's very near the beginning. I think Gorrister was the one that was hung up by his foot and had been bled out. And Ellen wants to get the body down, and she gets slapped by the living version of Gorrister. She slumps on the ground, starts crying, and then Ted basically goes on to talk about how she always used crying as a defense, but we got used to that about 75 years ago. And it's just it's very dismissive of her. Again, it leans into that almost well, it's not almost, it absolutely is very much a woman-hating character that Ted is. But they've all been reduced by that point after 109 years, or at least a perceived 109 years. They've all been ground down and reduced to aspects of humanity rather than fully rounded human beings. Like Ellen very clearly is the sexual drive. Ted go on.
No, I was just going to say, it's not in one of the 2 episodes that we watched, but later on in Amazing Digital Circus, which we'll talk about here in a second, there's Jax talks about this, like the bunny rabbit character, where he talks about how we've become archetypes inside this world. It's our personalities have sort of fallen to the wayside, and we're leaning into, and for him it was this way of accepting that this is what it is and that they can't escape, and to not let his mind sort of break or whatever. But I just, as soon as you said that, I was just like, oh shit, this is talked about in the other show too.
Yeah,
anyway.
And it wouldn't be surprising to me at all if I'd put any effort into it and looked into the Digital Circus and any interviews that the creators had given, if they weren't inspired by a range of things, including this story, because it really does feel like the word derivative was used earlier, and the fact that this story is one of those building blocks on which a lot of things like The Matrix have sprung up from. Even if The Amazing Digital Circus was in some way inspired by The Matrix, that means that in turn it was inspired by this story. So it all does link together. I think Benny is the one that was turned into an ape. So he's got a very simple intellect from the very few lines that he. I mean, it says here it's like that cogito ergo sum line. I think, therefore I am. Benny drooled a little and snickered. There, and it goes on about the Chinese and Russian and American hams. Benny is kind of almost like representative of like early man, almost like the like Homo erectus, like the first kind of like not modern men, but like the progenitors of what man would come from. I'm struggling with Gorister and Nimdok. All that I can remember from Gorister was that he got hung up every now and then and drained like a pig. And Nimdok had even less character than that. I cannot remember very much at all about Nimdok.
I think Gorister, the main thing, and I just reminded myself through the Wikipedia article too. But they have
objector, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, he had like a very passion. Like that was one thing that Am drained from him was his passion and his ideals and everything. To where now he just is apathetic and, but yeah.
So they. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's, like I said earlier, there is someone out there that's written a piece about this that explains everything in a much more succinct way than my conscious stream can currently manage. But I think the main thing that I want to put out there, which I've already said, is the success of this for me personally is that even though it is science fiction, it really focuses on human interactions with each other, and I think it's trying to get that point across, as a lot of fiction did during the time of the Cold War, which was a much longer period than any of us seem to appreciate. Like, we're talking like basically end of Second World War all the way through to the 1980s. Like the entire time that the USSR was a thing. After the war, that it wasn't until the fall of the wall and the USSR breaking up that really it kind of came to an end. I'm not a history major, so I couldn't tell you for sure if I was right in what I was saying, but it feels that way. So yeah, like it takes like the Cold War developing into World War III, and then that legacy of hatred that comes from that. It's warning against that essentially. Like, this is a cautionary tale of what happens if we go all in on the Cold War and the Cold War turns hot, which it feels like a lot of fiction from that era was talking about that kind of fear. It's a social commentary, and it's something that a lot of episodes of Star Trek. There was one about mutually determined destruction, where there were, what was it, war games? It was something like that it was called. I can't remember the exact title of it, but essentially there were these supercomputers on a planet that would decide who would have died in the event of an attack on a city, and then those people would then very calmly and serenely walk to the nearest disintegration pod and end their lives. So basically it was a war, but none of the buildings were destroyed or anything. It was literally just like, let's take the destruction of property out of the matter. Let's just kill people as they were deemed to have been killed by these computers. And it just highlights the madness of war and the stupidity of the leaders at times. And yeah, I'm really fucking rambling here, but I just as it occurs to me, so it spills forth from my lips.
Okay, I think we can pivot over to the other thing we're talking about now, the Amazing Digital Circus. So as I mentioned at the top of the episode, this is one that very directly was inspired by this short story. But it's interesting. I mentioned last week how I got pretty into this show last week and ended up watching all of it, which is 7 episodes. We're talking about the first 2. And even then, we don't have to break down. Like, let's talk about episode 1. Now let's talk about episode 2. It's just those are the first 2 that we watched. I'll read from Wikipedia here the little description. The series follows a group of humans trapped inside a circus-themed virtual reality game where they are overseen by an erratic artificial intelligence while coping with personal traumas and psychological tendencies. So sounds pretty close. We follow 6 humans, Pomni, Jax, Ragatha, Gangle, Kinger, and Zubul, who have become trapped in the titular circus, a cartoonish virtual reality game. Under the direction of the circus's ringmaster, an artificial intelligence named Kane, they engage in nonsensical adventures to distract themselves from their situation, all while at risk of losing their sanity and, quote, abstracting into digital monstrosities, completely losing who they are. So yeah, the first 2 episodes in particular, I think, kind of capture the tone of the series in terms of like the stuff that it's balancing, because it is very much like the short story, I think, but then in a lot of ways very unlike and kind of playing against it, which leads to some interesting stuff. So let's do the similar thing here. Andi, what did you think of Amazing Digital Circus, episodes 1 and 2?
I actually watched 3 episodes. You probably didn't read our messages this morning, but Dave at some point said if I can get to it, I should watch episode 3 as well. So I watched 3.
Okay.
Yeah. So Dave watched 4, I believe, but 1 through 3 are the episodes that all of us have seen.
Okay.
Yeah. Similarly to the short story, I do like the concept, but aesthetically, it's not my bag. So it has interesting story ideas, and then some visual elements that I enjoyed when the story gets out of its main world and opens up some other doors or worlds or characters that I enjoyed some more. Overall, yeah, it is basically the same concept. People stuck in a digital world that is ruled by some entity, and they go on adventures, and it deals with very existentialist thoughts and ideas and the meaning of existence and things like that, which I do appreciate and which I do enjoy. But again, it's the packaging that doesn't really let me connect with the show as a whole to make me interested in watching all of it and really following it, because these things are discussed in other pieces that I enjoy aesthetically more, so that I cannot overlook the fact that I don't really enjoy looking at it, although I may enjoy some of the stories and ideas the show is dealing with. So yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not a great contributor this week.
Oh no, it's all good. It's how,
I'm
that's
sure.
how it goes.
I'm sure I've got enough inane rambling to cover for it. Don't worry.
All right, I'll throw it over to you now, Dave. What did you think of the first, let's say, 3 episodes?
I really enjoyed the first 3 episodes. The 4th episode I wasn't so great on, but honestly, like I think if we just concentrate on the first 3, the first one does a really good job as the pilot episode, introducing Pomni, using her as that window character through which we can kind of attach ourselves and learn about the world at the same time. The art style of the show, I appreciate it for the amount of effort that goes into making the show. But similarly to Andi, I'm not sure that it's an art style that I really gel with. But not everything has to be made for everybody. And, this is one of those examples where I think the content of the show itself makes up for the issues that I have with the look of it. It's not necessarily to the point where I'm like, oh my God, I need to watch every episode of this. Hence why I got to the 4th episode and then kind of tapped out, because I was like, this really didn't work for me, this one. I'm just going to put something else on and get some sleep. But I really like the voice acting. I think the animation, despite the look of it, I think the animation itself is really well done. The facial expressions, especially, I think, really work very well indeed. The concept isn't a new one. Even in recent times, we've seen a slew of animated projects where the main character is trapped in a virtual reality world, whether it be Sword Art Online or other. It's kind of straddling the line between stranded VR and isekai in a way. But, you know, it also has a little bit, dare I say, and I'm not an expert on this, I know that you're much more into the into this particular type of stuff, and I've promptly forgotten the name for it, so this is going to be a fun guessing game. It's not Newgrounds. You know where, like, the Slender Man came from and stuff like that?
Oh, creepypasta.
Creepypasta, yeah. It's kind of got a creepypasta kind of feel to it, which I appreciate. But yeah,
there's absolutely some backrooms stuff directly in the show, like you see it. I think at the end of the first episode, there's a shot of a computer that that you see them. They're maybe kind of in, and then there's also later on in the series a moment, maybe a couple moments, where Kane is looking at these Polaroid pictures of the backrooms, and there's like something about it that's capturing his. So yeah, I think both like metaphorically and then also literally, you're absolutely right with that.
Cool. So yeah, I like the tone of it. It's just, if it wasn't for it's literally just the art style that I'm not 100% behind, and also I really. There was some really cool stuff going on in the fourth episode, but overall it just didn't do anything for me whatsoever. You know, if it hadn't have been for that Halloween free call out, then I think I probably
forgot about that.
Yeah. I probably. Oh, I don't know, because now I'm thinking about it, and Gangle had a really interesting character arc in that episode, so maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I was just flagging at the end of a long day.
I like episode 4, but I think also, I don't know, maybe this is mean to say, Gangle's my least favorite character of the bunch, probably. I don't know if I think like she's not one dimensional, but like it's very sort of like it's harder, I think, for her to show as much depth or range because of the particular like mental place that she's in. And so doing an entire episode of her or on her and on her specific neuroses or mental illness struggles, whatever else, I think is a little bit harder because there's like you have to dig a little deeper for the nuance. So I do like that episode, but also when you said that, I was like, I don't even remember what episode 4 was, and then when I looked it up, I was like, oh, it's the one at the fast food place. Okay, I see why you said that.
Yeah,
like that's but yeah, go ahead.
So having said that, like the background art for that episode was really good. At points I was looking at it thinking, have they just taken photos of a real place and then animated over the top of it? So I don't know. But so like from a technical point of view, the show is really, really strong. From a voice acting point of view, it's excellent. I think there's potential for a really interesting story to be told regarding Kane and who he really is, and if he is actually in charge of things, and why are they trapped there? Who is it that is responsible for them being trapped there? And I don't doubt that will be something that they'll, if not already, then they will be looking at.
Yeah,
I like the Monster of the Week style show Adventure of the Week, not Monster of the Week, but every week they got a brand new place they can explore. And I think the strength of that is really summed up in the third episode. I think episode 3, The Mystery of Mildenhall Manor, is the strongest episode that I've seen out of the first 4. Not only because it's like a flat-out horror episode with a haunted mansion and a really cool mechanic where they keep finding these recordings, and Kinger comes out and just calls it out for what it is and says, well, this is in a really unuseful place, you know, like but it also made me a real fan of Kinger as a character as well. Like the whole back end of that episode where you kind of hear about his backstory and you see who Kinger is as a person when they haven't lost their sanity. It's really, really cool, and just made me love that character and made me hopeful that we would see a lot more instances where Kinga would be in a dark place, not mentally, but like physically in a dark place, where he was able to get his sanity back for a few moments, and we would be able to spend some time with a really well-adjusted member of the crew. But yeah, enjoyed it. Did enjoy it very much. And I will probably watch the rest of it at a later date. It's going to be one of those where I'll just kind of like, I've got 25 minutes spare, I'll watch another episode here. I don't think this is going to be one of those ones where I'm going to be watching several episodes back to back. If for no other reason than this studio also has another show out called The Knights of Guinevere, which I watched the first episode of last night, the pilot episode. It's their first 2D animated show, and it looks really, really good. So I think
I've read stuff about it as well, and it kind of seems like everything they've put out, people have really dug the different shows, and
seems that way.
That's next on my list.
There's another 3D animated one that I've not seen of theirs yet that came up on my suggested list today, so I may give that a look. But Knights of Guinevere certainly seems like the one that is most down my alley, both in the look of the actual show, but also like it's got its sci-fi leanings and mysteries galore, and yeah, it looks pretty cool. But yeah, I did enjoy this one. I think if there's anyone that really like looks at the screenshots of character designs and thinks, that's the kind of thing that I would really enjoy looking at, then I mean the rest of it is a slam dunk. I don't think that there's much to complain about in regards to the individual episodes. I think they're all pretty well done. Some of them are slightly more slow moving than others, as already mentioned. But like that third episode, like goddamn, if you're going to show anyone a single episode of this show to try and get them interested, I think that might be the one, at least for me. It works really well. So yeah.
And I've mentioned already in the past or past weeks or whatever how much I kind of fell in love with the show. I absolutely understand and starting to say empathize, it's too dramatic of a word. I absolutely understand the lack of connection with the visual style. That's one thing that is so subjectively right up my alley. Like I grew up watching shows from the 90s that were like this as a kid in terms of the visual style, stuff like Reboot or Beast Wars. Those are the two that I usually mention when talking about this in particular. But that like very smooth, like low poly kind of. In fact, when the first episode starts, before they go into the actual circus, it's even more kind of like pixelated. And I thought that was going to be the whole show, was that style. Like that's more kind of what I remember it as. And the animation also gets, I didn't realize this as I was watching it, but after I watched episode 7 and then went back to rewatch episodes 1 and 2 for the show, I realized like, the animation is really jumped. Like I think it's really strong in the first, even in the pilot, and was pretty well received for that in particular as well. But it absolutely gets stronger and stronger and stronger as they go through. Yeah, I totally understand everything you guys are saying here, good and bad about it. Like it's one that I think on some levels like clicks with me on a pretty personal level in terms of the style. Gooseworks, creator I did not know about until the show, 31-year-old. She worked, she was a composer on season 1 of Has Been Hotel, and a bunch of other Hell of a Boss as well, like other animated things that she's worked on over time. Very super involved in this show. So like written and directed, but then also like the character designs. Like if you look at the credits on pretty much any episode, like Gooseworks' name is mentioned a ton. There's I don't know specifically how much this like era or style was an influence on them, but the style of storytelling reminds me, even though the fandom is crazy toxic, I'm a big fan of Steven Universe. And Steven Universe, even though it's definitely more shifted toward I don't want to say kids, it's all ages. Like it's it definitely has gags and jokes and styles and stuff that are geared towards younger viewers, but they tackle bigger stuff. Now, the difference being in Amazing Digital Circus, at times when they tackle the dark stuff, they linger on it or go deeper on it in a way that would be inappropriate for kids. And not even inappropriate to where it would be, offensive or it would, f them up, but just kind of, it's clearly exploring deeper stuff that a kid's not even going to necessarily pick up on, whether that's, severe depression, isolation, suicidal tendencies, body dysmorphia. What else? I mentioned depression already. I think that's a big one. This feeling of abstraction, being forgotten, etc. Deals with in much more specific ways. And then, like you said, too, and Steven Universe, this is my main point of comparison because I've watched all of Steven Universe, did this really well too, and it's something that I really enjoy about Amazing Digital Circus is what you described earlier, Dave, like the kind of the lore that they're in. So you have this setup right away that they're all stuck in this program. There's this sort of kind of maniacal, unhinged AI. He's not evil like Am, but he is clearly not telling them the truth in some ways. There's moments where he talks about how he's not able to affect their minds or their free will, but then there's other moments where it seems very much like he is able to do that. And then in each episode, we get little bits of stuff. There's so much, and especially rewatching this, there's so much stuff that's telegraphed and set up in, I think, pretty expertly done ways in terms of some of these characters, what they're able to do within the world, where they how their past play into who they are as these characters and these archetypes. There's a lot of not a lot, but there are moments too of visual metaphor that I found very effective. There's one at the end of season 2 that I liked a lot, or episode 2 that I liked quite a bit, where it opens with Pomni having this nightmare of being essentially forgotten. It's very similar to a scene in Toy Story 2, actually. I think it's Toy Story 2, of Woody falling into this black hole and being forgotten by everyone. And then we circle back to the end, or that nightmare sequence again by the end of the episode. But you have these other characters in this visual metaphorical way reaching out and grabbing Pomni, not letting her completely fall. So there is, whereas I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream has this, crazy sense of despair, hopelessness, of nihilism in a lot of ways. There is a center to Amazing Digital Circus that has some hope to it. I don't know if the show will ultimately end that way or pay off in ways that are that big. I'm intentionally not spoiling stuff from later episodes in case we have any listeners who end up watching all of it, but there's a few, even in episode 7, there's some pretty major stuff that happens, both in terms of the tone of the show, but then also the lore and, what might be happening, what might not be happening. There's a handful of them that a Smart Otaku sent us in that email as well that kind of break down, when this thing happens, people are theorizing that it means this. There's a lot of stuff like that. It's a pretty dense show when it comes to the world and the lore that they've set up, and it, again, feels all very intentional. But the thing I like about it the most, for sure, is that weird balance of different vibes. I mentioned last week the Doki Doki Literature Club and how this isn't like that game, but it scratches a similar itch for me, where it's it is this one thing on the surface, but then when you go further in, it's this other thing, and then when you go further in, it's this other thing, and then suddenly it's 3 or 4 different things that on paper feel pretty disparate, but then you're juggling them all in a way that kind of works and is its own new thing. For me, it's particularly exciting too because of having something be directly inspired by something that it's so similar but so dissimilar from at the same time. I found to be a pretty interesting sort of pairing when we go between the original short story, the Harlan Ellison short story, and then Amazing Digital Circus. But I kind of just fell in love with it overall, man. I became pretty attached to the characters, and even some of them I like more than others. There's still, I think the voice acting's great. I think it's a lot of voice actors, some of them from anime and video games, some of them from web productions and YouTube stuff. But it all feels very very intentional and very like crafted in a way that, really worked for me.
It's very polished
for some reason.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
like it definitely.
I love the. Go ahead.
Sorry, it definitely doesn't sound like people just, with a lot of YouTube, or at least stuff that starts on YouTube. It's very do-it-yourself, or at least it used to be before.
Yeah.
I guess all the corporations got involved. And so you would have people that would have like makeshift studios doing their voiceovers in like closets with blankets all over the place to try and deaden the sound. But there's just an extra level of polish that you can tell the difference. And it feels very much like the performances that people are giving here were done by people that were, using very, very good setups and were really paying attention to their delivery. And it wasn't a case of, I'll do 3 takes and then the director can choose the one that they think is best out of those. Like, it feels like something that was maybe not recorded at a professional studio, with loads and loads of takes, but certainly it feels like something that was done to... Hang on, sorry, I muted myself. I just discovered just now that apparently the space bar is the mute button. I didn't realise this. I do now. It was done with someone doing quality control at the time, so they got the best of the best of the best every single take. And yeah, I mean, great performances from the voice actors. My concern is knowing that this was inspired directly by the short story by Harlan Ellison. If this turns, if Kane breaks bad, so to speak, it could go really dark really quickly. And I don't want that to happen to these lovable idiots, because in the course of only a few episodes, I'm not so sure about Jax. I feel like Jax is one of those characters who there's nothing particularly that they do that makes them a super lovable character, but you would probably be very annoyed if they were harmed. Like, it's not a case of protect at all costs, but it's very much a case of, I feel like Jax is one of those characters that will come good at the end. But like, if something happens to Ragatha or Kinga, I'm going to be very angry, because Ragatha from the beginning has been a really compassionate, thoughtful character who has reached out and tried to be kind and thoughtful and helpful to Pomni. And Kinga just is Kinga. I don't know what else I can say about him. Like, he's just he's suffered a lot, and he's just a really lovely soul. I wouldn't be surprised if Pomni ended up just going berserk and just burning the fucking place down. That wouldn't surprise me. But
there's some crazy stuff with
devastated.
With Jax in particular that I won't spoil, but there's a couple episodes in particular that dive deeper into his past and why he acts the way that he does. But there's still so much that we don't know. Like, you get these glimpses of, I think that it's supposed to be his life outside of the game, but I don't know for sure. And it also, if I'm remembering correctly, looked like real footage, like not actual. Like, it's a sequence of somebody driving through like the country, like in the woods, kind of at night, and they've set it up in a way. I'm trying to like not talk about it but by talking about it, they've set it up in a way where there's clearly a lot more there. But he's set up all these walls, and I wondered with his character how they were going to handle it, because he, like you said, he's this like he's the most, I don't want to say he's the most cartoony looking one. He definitely has aspects of his design that are like kind of like retro animation sort of style, like Oswald the Lucky Rabbit or Mickey or something, that they lean into, and he breaks the fourth wall. And like, this one of the things that they talk about, he talks about himself with these like archetypes, but then you find out he's very specifically built himself this way because of certain things. And there are a couple of scenes that I thought were very effective with conveying like anxiety and panic attacks and stuff like that you see. I also really like too how there's an existing, similarly to I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, although in a larger, less depressing way, there's a larger history at play. Like when we arrive, there's this other, or when Pomni arrives, there's this other character who has been part of their crew that we never really get to see, Kaufmo. Like he's abstracted, but there's clearly more to who he was, and to them, to the rest of the characters, she's another new person that's showing up, and they don't have answers, but they've gone through this before, and so you're kind of constantly getting little drips and drabs of that throughout the series of what things were like for these other characters, and some people don't talk about them very intentionally. And I also wonder too, like how, like you said, it could go dark pretty quickly. Like I wonder too what they've started to kind of the edges have started to fray a little bit with some of those ideas of like what all is possible, what's not possible, what's going on with Kane. We've seen things with Kane throughout the series too that
he glitches.
He kind of glitches, or like something is off with him in certain ways. Anyway, I won't spoil too much more, but there's plenty of stuff like that for me keeps me absolutely like interested in coming back to it. The new episode comes out, I want to say March, I think it was 20th, which they basically are releasing them as they do them. So it'll be, months in between episodes or whatever. And then also, I'm not on any streaming services anymore, but apparently this is on Netflix at some point. Got picked up.
It's not something that I've noticed when I've been scrolling, but I'm going on there now.
I watched it on Netflix.
Oh, you did?
Oh, did you? Okay. Yeah. So I don't think it's like a big... now it's a Netflix exclusive deal or whatever. Or like I think they're just distributing it. Is what it seems like. But yeah, my friend Trevin is the only person other than you guys that I've reached out to be like, hey, you should check out the show. Like, I think you might like it. I'm really into it. He was like, I don't know anything about it other than I've had to stop my 2 daughters from watching it on Netflix. So apparently it pops up on there every once in a while. And he knew enough about it to be like, you guys can't watch this.
It does look like a kid's
they're young.
show for sure.
And I told Daniel, I was like, you're gonna see in our YouTube app like these thumbnails because I've been watching. You can't watch this show. Like, it looks like a kid's show, but it's not.
Do you know the beauty of looking it up on Netflix just now is I'm getting that kind of silent rolling advert in the background as I'm on the page, and it's reminding me of so many things from the first episode that I absolutely loved that I've completely forgotten to mention already, which is like when Pomni first turns up and she swears and the little box covers her mouth and she gets bleeped out, and then she goes on this long tirade of all these different swear words which you can't tell what they are except for maybe the last one. It's a different noise with each one, and while I was watching it at the time I was like, I have an idea for what I want to do for the episode, but I think it's a lot more work than I'm willing to put in. Basically, I was going to take all the noises that they used to bleep the expletives from that show, and I was going to use them to bleep our expletives from the episode. But if that hasn't happened, dear listener, I apologise. It's because I'm
it's a lot
very
of work.
fucking lazy, and I like to get these shows out as soon as I can. But it's on Netflix over here, so I may have to give that a watch on Netflix instead of watching it with the constant barrage of fucking adverts on YouTube.
Last thing I'll quickly mention too that I really liked in the second episode, we didn't really touch on at all, is I think the first episode does a good job of, like you said, Dave, like the pilot, it does a good job of establishing this sort of thing. We get that slow zoom on Pomni's face at the end where she's like maybe
cracking.
Going crazy, like like
smile.
something's she's not handling it well. But then in the second episode, that again, doing it in a way that's not, we're dealing with these like very brightly colored, candy colored sort of circus characters, but still getting some of those same emotional type gut punches. Like I thought it was pretty fucked up and crazy where she brings Gummy Goo back and Kane just kills him immediately. Like, man. There's the way that it's handled and dealt with and executed, no pun intended, like it's a gut punch. And this is after you had this like shot, to me, surprisingly like poignant, serious, down to earth thing about this like identity crisis that he has. Then when they're down in the the back door, like, section of the map or whatever, where he finds these character models of him and the other people, and him realizing like, I have these memories, but they're not real. Do I even have a mom? Like, everything about his entire, existence, he's realizing is a lie. And it went to places right away where I was like, oh shit, I didn't realize that the show was going to kind of really dig into this stuff. And it's this kind of thing that I think makes it less a show for kids, because it's not offensive stuff. It's just more concepts that, a kid's not really going to wrap his mind around, as well as cutting back to Jax and the other alligators fighting, with Mad Max trucks or whatever.
Candy Crush Mad Max trucks.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of stuff introduced in those first 2 episodes too, with like, and again, I'm not an expert by any means on animation and video games design, stuff like that, but the like collision physics being messed up with certain objects, like that's a running thing throughout the show that they lean into. Like there's kind of a shorthand that these characters have in a way that's very different from I Have No Mouth and I'm a Scream, which would have been written, in the 60s, and a time when, your average person, I'm guessing, isn't going to have much, if any, experience with computers and, the idea of like other virtual worlds and stuff like that. Whereas opposed to these characters have a little bit more of a shorthand. They got there somehow. They put on a headset and then we're in this place. And so there's a degree of knowledge and how they're able to manipulate and interact with the world that I found interesting, just because of how, time and technology have changed over the past 40, 50 years.
I did also enjoy the fact, you reminded me of something there, and I'm not going to spoil it for everyone else, but I enjoyed the fact that there were certain aspects of earlier episodes that they would revisit. Like it isn't a simple case of here's the episode for the week, here's the adventure that we're going on this week, and we're not acknowledging anything that's happened previously or it might happen again. There are characters that make little returns here and there. There are aspects of storylines that get picked up on again. There is obviously this overarching story of like, why are they there? Why can't they leave? Who is responsible? Who is Kane? Etc. Etc. But yeah, like the fact that it's not just like one of these shows that you could just watch a random episode. Well, no, actually, no, that's not true. You could watch any random episode and enjoy it, but if you watched it in order from beginning to end, then you would also get the benefit of this kind of overarching story that is being seemingly told, which is always something that I like to see from an ongoing show, because it keeps that interest going. There's a lot of shows that I haven't felt that need to continue to watch, mainly because I enjoy it well enough, but there's nothing that's got its claws into me to bring me back week after week after week. I can watch a random episode and I'll be happy to, but I don't really care about what's going on other than that. And that's not the case with this one. I do have an interest in seeing what the deal is with Kane and who is Bubble. Who is Bubble really, if anything? Is Bubble just the cute sidekick character, or is there something more going on with her?
Voiced by Gooseworks, by the way.
Voiced by Gooseworks. Also, another thing, Netflix have this really handy key on all of their episodes where they say what the genres are. And the genres for these are sci-fi series, fantasy series, and Australian. Because this is an Australian show, for anyone that didn't know.
Glitch specifically, I think, is...
I find it interesting, though, that that Australia is now a genre rather than a country. I'm sure that the people of Australia are really happy to know that they've been boiled down to a genre along with Bluey and Digital Circus. But also one more thing. Sorry, as far as the animation's concerned, because you mentioned about the collision physics, and I did want to just mention, because I saw in the credits that there were thanks given to Epic Games, and that made me think, oh, hang on, was this made in Unreal Engine? And it was. Not entirely in Unreal Engine, but it was rendered through Unreal Engine. It was the 3D work was primarily done using Autodesk Maya, and then it was rendered using Unreal Engine, and it's rendered at 30 frames per second, which I find very interesting because it's super smooth looking, and 30 frames to me feels like something that a lot of studios wouldn't do these days, especially with CG stuff. Everybody wants 60 frames per second on everything, which personally I think looks fucking weird. But 30 frames per second, I'm really glad that they stuck with that. Everything looks really silky smooth. And even though, and I have a growing appreciation of this style, not to the point that I'm going to be binging every episode one after the other, but I certainly appreciate it more than I once did. They mentioned the fact that Reboot is one of those shows that was kind of an inspiration for them, and you can absolutely tell that that's the case. But what I like is the fact that if you look at the details during a scene, Pomni is a great example of this. When she turns her head, she's not this stiff, rigid, three-dimensional character like you would get in things like Beast Wars or a Reboot. There's a fluidity to the movement, and the hat is a really good example of this because she wears this like twin-peaked jester's hat with bells on the end, and as she turns her head, just the points of the hat just have a little bit of a sway to them. Like, it makes everything feel like it's got weight and it exists in a real world, as weird as that sounds, being as the characters look the way they do. But it just makes everything feel a little more there. And it's a tiny little thing to do, but it makes such a difference when you're using this kind of visual style, but you want to make it look like some care has been taken, and you know, we're making this in 2025, 2026, not making it back in the mid-1990s. Things have moved on, and we need to reflect that. The glitch animation from the first episode I really liked, when she goes to help Raghafa up and her hand then starts glitching.
Yeah.
Things like that. Just the little things that they do in animation where I'm at a dangerous point where I know just enough of how things are done where it scares me when I see something being done, and I'm like, the amount of work it must have taken to do that is insane to me. You know what I mean? Like, I'd much rather be just completely blind to what it takes and just enjoy it, but I'm already here, so.
And there's also a blend, to your point, like, of the animation style of now in terms of adding in some of, like, it happens a lot with Kane. There's a lot of blocking stuff with Kane that I find really interesting in terms of like visual gags and like the way he utilizes time and space, specifically space, where like he's kind of the unhinged Deadpool. He's a weird character because you see why there's the inspiration from Am through I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, but there's also you kind of like him in a weird way. Like he's goofy and weird and over the top and yes, definitely like unhinged, kind of unstable. But there you get glimpses of this again, similarly to I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Like he wants to be liked. He wants to be like the human people. But his job is essentially to just keep them distracted. Like that's essentially what it is, to keep them, you know, here, not able to leave or abstract or whatever else. But even that is like kind of secondary. Like he has So anyway, there's stuff where he interacts with, like, and they do it through the animation, through him like getting up in characters' faces or gags or whatever else that are very modern, but are still utilizing like the kind of throwback animation style that they have, but with modern techniques that I really liked. I thought it worked really well, and he's just got a cool design too, just like this weird.
The eyes inside of the
set
teeth.
of teeth with eyeballs.
The way that they deform the teeth so that you at times you can see him like raising an eyebrow, and the teeth, they are not real teeth, of course they're not, but they don't act like real teeth either. There's so much flexibility in them, but it's something about that character. It just works really well. The eyes popping out of the head occasionally. The shiny trousers are a distraction. I don't know why, but they're a distraction to me. And also I kind of dig the fact, knowing now that this was inspired directly by I Have No Mouth and I Want to Scream, or I Must Scream. Somehow And I don't know how he did it, but Kane is doing the exact same job as Am, but doing it much better by accident. Um, because he's on a daily basis, he's psychologically torturing these poor people that are stuck in the computer, but he doesn't mean to. He means to give them something to do with their time. He's trying to be helpful. At least we think so at this point. But somehow he's managing to psychologically devastate these people on a daily basis through no ill will or malice. So, just going to prove that as hateful as Am was, sometimes ineptitude can really push you up that career ladder a little bit quicker. Okay. I really don't want any of these characters to be evil buts. But I would certainly... It depends on the writing, how it's landed, of course. If they ended up turning Kane in a way that made perfect sense, I would certainly give it a good chance. And I think I might be for it, but I'm enjoying him being a doofus at the moment. And I guess we just have to see how long this show is intended to run. Like, does...
I've thought about that too.
Yeah, like, does Gooseworks have a defined ending, or are they just going to keep churning these out as long as they have new funny ideas? Is this Duffer Brothers, or is it Lost, basically, is what I'm asking.
I think the season is 9 episodes, so it's...
so have a plan at least.
It's got 2 more episodes, yeah. And then I don't know if they're going to be doing more seasons beyond that. I would be fine with it just being 1 season and being done. Like, I think that they captured something pretty, interesting and really effective that doesn't need to be a multi-series or multi-season kind of deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point with Kane too, like the last thing I'll say, and I'll wrap it up. I know we're running long. They still do a good job of balancing likability, comedy, but then also horror a little bit. Like there's an episode, I think it's episode 6 or 7, might be episode 7, where they are trying to accomplish something without Kane knowing about it. And at least for me, the whole episode, I was just pretty tense, where it was just like, how are they going to pull this off? Like, there's no escaping. Like, they still have established this really good sense of like, this is a world that they really can't do a whole lot in, and they have to find ways throughout that. And Kane is maybe more or less all-knowing, and there's a twist in that episode even too that kind of even more hammers that down. Like, so yeah, it's a weird balancing act of tones, but I think it works pretty well overall.
They're managing very well so far. And as I said, I will watch the rest of this. It's got its hooks in me well enough that I'm going to finish watching the 7 that are available, and I'll probably, if I continue to watch it on Netflix, it will let me know when new episodes drop anyway, so that's fine. It's the art style isn't one that I'm necessarily drawn to on a regular basis, but I think everything else about this show really makes up for that. I don't hate the art style. I'm indifferent to it. At least the general kind of design. I think the details in the design I appreciate a lot more. Like, as I said earlier, facial expressions and things like that. I've got no idea how you get me to feel anything for a character like Zubul, who is basically just a collection of parts that vary from episode to episode, by the way. Like, I've paid attention to that, and she changes up body parts basically on an episode by episode basis. But somehow they've managed it. And I think it's a combination of good writing and good voice acting.
Plays into the story too, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I've discovered things about the character from the Wikipedia article that I've not yet been made aware of in the show, and I completely understand, and it makes sense, and I get it, But yeah, at this point, 4 episodes in, the fact that I actually care about Zubul at all is just testament to the voice actors and the writers and everyone that's involved, because there's nothing inherently about that character in the first few episodes that makes me drawn to them just from a visual standpoint, because there's nothing really that makes them. I mean, the first episode, Zubul basically doesn't exist, except at the very end. Like, she goes missing, and she's the MacGuffin for the entire episode. But yeah, lots of time for the writing and for the voice acting and the animation department, the actual like physical animation of the characters and of the environment as well. Special shout out to whoever's responsible for those environments. The detail that goes into that, it comes together to create a show that, although if you showed me a still of it, I would be like, I don't know if I'm that bothered by it. And having only watched the first episode, as I said before, like ages ago for Janan, and being like, no, this is fine, but I don't feel like I'm probably going to watch that much more. Having then kind of gone back to it and watched up to the fourth episode, and especially for that third episode, the way that it really did great things for Kinga as a character, and experiencing more of like the overarching story and the little bits that have been dropped here and there about Kane and things like that really kind of suddenly make you think, oh, there's something more here. It's not just, here's today's episode, it has no bearing on anything else that's happened before or after. It makes me want to check it out. So yeah, I think probably by this time next week I'll have watched the rest of this and be waiting for the 8th episode. So well done to them. Good on them.
Yeah, I think it's cool stuff. Okay, I think we can wrap it up there, unless you guys had any other final thoughts on our pairing this week.
No.
Okay. All right. Listeners, let us know what you thought of either one of these things. If you read the short story or had a chance to check out Amazing Digital Circus over on YouTube or on Netflix, if you're a Netflix person. Again, hit us up on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, longer form thoughts, eerieinternational@gmail.com, and we will read them on air. Thank you for listening. Stay safe out there. Keep watching horror movies, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.